No. The Bahamas. I didn't believe it. It's really.
That's down the wall.
You can't call us in, I mean, come on.
I
Don't be on there listening to us.
Even sent me pictures and I still didn't believe it.
All right, we're good down here.
Okay, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. If you'll stand, we'll recite the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mayor Kim Harrison Edwards here. Councilwoman Sherry Rogers here. Councilman Stephen White here. Councilwoman Debbie Gump. Councilman Herb Curtis. City Manager Nate Stansberry.
Present.
City Attorney Brian Bailey.
Here.
Finance Manager Joe Solberg.
Here.
Chief Mike Posey. Chief Jimmy Suttle.
Here.
Building Code Zoning Enforcement Officer Marty Lewis.
Here.
Street Commissioner Mike Starrett. Sanitary Director Dee Evans.
Here. Okay, we have no one signed for public comments, so we'll move on to old business annexation update.
We're kind of, I won't say we're negotiating or anything of that nature, but Walmart and I have had some back and forth, the mayor and Brian in that order as well. Just answering the question about general impact of taxes and things of that nature. Talking about potential programs that we could maybe entertain. So the latest email was a concern about property taxes, their property taxes going up, which of course would happen. I do know Buchanan has a property tax rebate program that they've instituted, and I don't think it was necessary for annexation, but it was for like industrial development, things of that nature. And so I think we would have the ability to do something like that. So my latest response to them is that we hear those concerns, but I think there's some flexibility there that we may be able to offer if they'd be willing to the voluntary annex, and that we'd like to have those conversations with them. And so I'm trying to keep us out of the no, thank you, and we're done talking to you, and hopefully get to a point where we can share some ideas and things of that nature. So I had that, the latest, that response was, thank you very much, we appreciate it, we'll take that back to our folks and talk about those things. And so, yeah, that's the latest there. I want to share that with you. Now, I've gone back and forth on sending you to those emails, and I haven't, because I just think that's probably something that's done in a confidential manner in a sense, right, between those parties. But feel free if you have any questions, come by. I don't mind sharing the language or anything of that nature. So that's about it. I think I did mention at the regular council meeting that I have a draft outline of maybe some next steps in annexation if this doesn't necessarily work out, or maybe some other direction. I was hoping to share it with you tonight, but there's just been too much going on, frankly, with everything else. So and Herb's not here, so I think it's a conversation for when everybody's here as well. So there have been some thoughts on that. And I think as we move forward, we're going to have to probably find some kind of incentive scheme to get people to come in. Right? I think we all recognize that. And so first new fire we're talking about tonight is going to be part of that calculus, I think. But we've batted around some things. I've been looking at different cities, what they do. So we have some thoughts on that I'm going forward, and I'll share with you later today. Unless there's any other questions, that's all I have.
Okay. Ordinance 2024-02, municipal fee and first due fire fee. Is there discussion prior to?
I think it should be.
First reading.
This is not the same ordinance that you guys had presented to you at the regular council meeting. I will say that a tremendous amount has changed. We did throw it out and start a new one, but there were some places that we did make some modifications. I think as we got into it, and every time you read this, you find something else maybe should be tweaked, and so that was part of that process. We did prepare two different versions, right, for consideration tonight. And again, there's no pressure on you to pass this tonight. It's an option for you. But we presented, I think, essentially a fire fee only. and also a fire, police and street, which is more akin to what we've been operating out of traditionally. Now, I will say, traditionally, we've assumed that there was, for all intents and purposes, even coverage between the three services. That's not the case in our fire, streets and police version. We've reduced those amounts to make the fire fee a little bit heavier to try to fund that service to the best of our ability. I think from our projections, we're still not fully funded necessarily, even with the fire fee only for the entire fire service. And when I say that, it's kind of a loaded response in the sense that we're projecting hiring 4 new bodies at the fire department to help cover that first year area with a more robust response. Truck expenses that the VFD is currently fundraising toward. So I think we're still a little bit shy there. And of course, internally, this has been our discussion. We don't know what our collection rate is going to be if we do enact the first fee fire fee. It's very hard to project what kind of money you will bring in. If we get 100% collections, we may have some extra cash that I think we need to roll into some kind of capital improvement fund for a new firehouse or building a firehouse or something of that nature. But what we've seen, Joe, right, is from other counties, we're seeing what a collection rate of
60 to 75%.
Yeah.
We don't see 100% collection rate.
No.
Realistic.
No, like right now, our municipal fee collection rate is in the low 90s usually,
Yeah, we do.
which is good.
Uh-huh.
So at that rate, we're still, and I think the scheme would be, we ramp up our service, right, as funds allow. And as we bring these funds in, we make those judgment calls every year about how we're doing. We try to get better, more efficient, collecting them, all that, those kind of things. So that's what we're thinking as far as that fee and the potential revenue. We've got some numbers and figures we can talk about if that's a concern thing tonight. But I think the real question is the amounts and how do we want to structure this fee? So, and I think Sherry, you had some requests to you were the name that came up a lot in this discussion. We're preparing, and we're not trying to be easy, but I think there's a thought process when we tabled it to say, should we be looking at maybe a heavier slanted fire fee, which is the fire fee only option, or still trying to mix our municipal fee up? And so there's any discussion on that. Joe, I'll let you give the numbers if you want, or if there's any questions, I guess we can talk about that. But I don't know exactly how we want it to be, but, or if we just want to go through the ordinances, we can do that as well. But I think from our standpoint this week, I'll just finish with this final thought. We've got to own this thing, right? And that's where we didn't want to come in here half cocked and say, this is not a perfect ordinance, and it's not perfect, but it's a lot better than it was when we presented it to you this past week, as far as structure and kind of catching some things. The things such as like in the fire, police and streets version, we have a vacant lot fee. Because we've found in the last 3 years I've been here that our police spend a lot of time on folks' lots, chasing vagrants and things of that nature off who contribute nothing to the police fee as it's currently structured. And so we wanted to make sure that those costs are captured in some form of fashion. And so in that fee, we, instead of charging the entire fee to those vacant lots, we've charged just a street police fee. Since it's a reduced rate, there's not a structure, but we have captured those streets and police costs with those vacant lots. Thoughts, questions?
And under the fire and police and streets version, it's not like the police would be defunded. The funds would just come from somewhere else other than what we're just generally want to call a municipal fee.
I think that's where I wondered, where particularly are those funds going to come from to fund the other departments?
Well, it's kind of the shell game, and that sounds criminal, but it's not, in a sense of, right now, we fund our municipal fee brings in $300,000 a year, right? And so in theory, each one of our services gets $100,000. If we had a fire fee only, we would bring in $400,000 just for the fire department. Right now, our fire department's budgeted at $475,000 just in city alone, our current cost. So instead of taking our $100,000 municipal fee and covering the rest of the cost of the fire department's operation with the general fund, we cover the fire department's operation with the fire fee and then use those saved general fund dollars from the fire department's operation to funnel back to those services. It goes back to our general fund. We've got the big pot. We're stirring it all up.
Hypothetically,
Yes.
say we get 50% participation on the first fee, fire fee, then half your budget is shot for the fire department, so then you're gonna have to pull from those contingencies to that you.
Yeah, and I think we've got to be wise and prudent about how we move forward with the first due. In practice, we cannot change our level of service at all. We could just charge the first due fee, and that money goes into the coffer to run the Weston Fire Department. I don't think that's how we want to do it, because we've got volunteers out there that we're trying to alleviate some of this pressure from. That's the purpose of this. But I do think, as far as ramping up the paid staff with the first due fire fees, if we only get 50% collection out there, we're probably not gonna be able to hire 4 additional firemen. We're gonna have to hire 2, something to that effect. And that'll come back to the chief's discretion on who gets priority when we have those major incidents out there. We have the staffing that we have, and he's gonna have to make those calls as best it sees fit. Does that make sense? I'm sorry. Answer your question, Debbie?
Yeah, I'm just still wondering.
Yeah, that's fair. It's a lot. It's a lot. And I don't think it's any skin off our back as far as whether this gets approved tonight or not. And Jimmy's gonna give me the glance there, and he should. But yeah, this is the big thing, right? And this is something that we've spent hours and hours this week going over, sleeping on it. So I think you guys have every right to do the same. Chew this thing over. We just wanted to make ourselves, have meetings so we can talk about it and be able to discuss the various aspects of it, of what we're proposing. Yeah, and then the numerical amounts, those are the things that are the real challenge. But I will say, what did the fire fee only option end up falling at, Joe? Do you remember what the first due residential level is?
225.
225, and I have no scientific reason, but it just seems like a lot. And so that was one of the things that we've kind of chatted about, the psychology of what that fire fee should be out there. And we don't have, I won't say we don't have good reason. I think we started with the fire code says we should have 2 people outside of the fire, 2 people inside of the fire. And that means you essentially have to have 4 people on duty to be able to provide that level of service. And that's a quadrupling of the fire fee or whatever you want to call it. It's a lot. We recognize we're not going to get that level of service with probably paid members of the fire department anytime soon at current fund levels. But I think the hope is that with a couple paid guys out there, that we will get those volunteers that will still come in and be able to provide that level of safety. But at least, if nothing else, we'll have a buddy, for lack of a better word, to go on these calls with, or ones that are really serious. And so that was kind of our starting point, and we're trying to get to that level of service and see where that number looks at. And like I said, I think $200 kind of seemed to be that number we were bumping up against in the first due. We also, on the municipal side, we tried to keep it to the level of inflation, plus or minus a couple dollars. And then I think the big aspect with commercial properties in the city, I think the ordinance, if I remember correctly, that you presented on Monday had a square footage charge for all commercial properties. Under my urging, and so feel free to shoot it down, but I felt that we're still subsidizing some of the fire service with general tax funds. Those general taxes, are property taxes and B&O taxes. And so I think wrote the provision in there, right, where it's going to be a flat rate commercial charge for folks in the city, because those businesses and commercial entities are paying additional taxes to help cover those and subsidize those services and those shortfalls. And so that was one thing I think that's kind of unique about our first due fire fee compared to other places, that we don't have that commercial rate, but we tried to base that number on 10% square footage up to 2,500 square feet to get to that portion of the fire fee in the fire fee that's broken down in 3 different services. And so that with using that logic, we ended up with a 15 cents per commercial square footage in the county, or in the first due fire area, I should say.
So to understand.
Yeah.
There is a flat rate for in city limits businesses because they are already paying additional taxes.
Yeah, those taxes
So they are,
subsidize the service.
which are contributing to the fire department.
Right.
So outside of that area, it is based on square footage.
Yeah, and there's
So-
a minimum fee, I think, right? Do we leave the minimum fee in there? I think of 2,500 square feet, we're going to make a minimum charge. Maybe not do that, okay. That's something we probably need to think about. But yeah, that was our logic behind it too.
So for instance, the asylum, with their huge square footage, they're not gonna be penalized for that. And no one's being penalized, but, let me just say that,
Their fire load's gonna be covered both from municipal service fees and from taxes. Yeah, that
Right,
portion in theory.
right, they're already paying that. Yes,
They still get charged, I think, per building, per structure. But that flat rate for the new adjusted rate, not per square foot. Joe, if I'm saying anything wrong, Brian, or anybody else, feel free to correct me.
I mean, I think you can charge. The law uses this really broad term called reasonable. As long as your expenses, as long as your charges are reasonable, you can charge it. Now, there's no defined meaning of reasonable in the code. We can only gather and glean from a couple cases that have gone to the Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court has looked at various cities' methods for charging, and they've looked at Bridgeport, and Bridgeport charged the proverbial $100 for in-city service, and then $150 for first due area service. And the Supreme Court looked at that and said, okay, that's reasonable. 1.5 times is a reasonable number for your first due area. And the Supreme Court looked at another case. This one was out of Elkins, and Elkins was charging the same costs in city and out of city. Now, those are, the closer you stay to those, the more we're going to be able to waive case law in front of the Supreme Court saying, look how reasonable this is. You all have already declared it reasonable. Now, that doesn't limit you to those two methods. As long as you can cover your budget and come up with a plan that's not putting all the onus on one particular business or one particular set of residential areas or whatever, then I think you can get away with being reasonable. I hate to say it's a crapshoot because it's technically not. I think you're going to get I think the court's going to give you a lot of leeway as long as you're using this as for fire expenses and you have the proverbial $800,000 budget this year. You magically raise $25 million in budget for this year. I think that's going to get a little unreasonable. But as long as you can keep the costs in this area of covering your fire budget, you're going to have a really strong ground stance.
And just the safety aspect of it, where we're sending one guy out in the middle of the night by himself in some of these places. Pretty dangerous, some of the stuff we do. And then NFPA, I think it's 1710. It's like a 5-minute rule. You're supposed to have a truck up the door within 5 minutes, sometimes ours is 10, 15 out in the county. We don't have guys to go, we can't send our paid staff right now out that way. Sometimes they go unanswered. I think there was 81 or 82 calls last year that went unanswered. Our area.
have you looked at both versions of these?
Yeah.
You know, weigh in on.
I like the fire and police and street version just because it's not as high right off the bat. I think it would give us a lot less headaches off the bat. I know they like disagree with me on some of that stuff. I just think it's a good start, and then we can see what we make off of it and adjust our budget as we go, and hire as we go. Because the safer grant does open again next month, so we can apply for that for the first 3 years to help our staffing.
Right.
As long as we have the budget to cover keep one guy up for that 3 years.
And the law, I think the law allows you to charge to cover all the costs of the fire department, but it doesn't require you to use the fee to cover all the costs of the fire department. So you can supplement it, for lack of a better word, with the fee. Defray the costs as the language goes.
And I think where we ended up with the street fee was around $150, or did we change that? It was 157 or 150? We went back.
Yeah, if you do the fire, police and streets version, then the first due residential is at 157.
Okay.
So it's a lot lower than the 2.4.
What is our city rate?
In city is 150.
Out of six.
I'm sorry, so in city is 105 for fire, but then you also tack on at least the streets for a total in city fee of 150. And then when you take that into the first due area, you only take that fire portion of 105, multiply it by 1.5, get the 157.50 in the first due area.
Okay, I understand. So essentially, citizens in the city limits are going to see a $50 increase. And when was the last time the 2009?
And correct me if I'm wrong, Nate, but 2009 is when we added the non-owner occupied property, but the actual residential municipal fee rate hasn't raised since, is it 99?
I think it went from $90 to $100, if I remember right,
Okay.
sometime in that 10-year period.
What's a fire truck tire cost? One.
About 600.
About-
And that's that, when I started this portion of the conversation, I wanted to make the point of like our street fee, the 2250. We've calculated, and that fee is different for different classes, so it's a little bit higher for non-resident or non-owner residential, and it's a little bit higher for commercial. But all that money collected in the street fee, I don't think covers the cost of just the street light bill that we have through First Energy
Right.
each year. And so that's essentially, we wanted to try to hit that and say, at least people say, hey, I'm paying the street fee, we can point to something direct and say, hey, your street fee's covering street lights.
Let's set the street light first.
Yeah, you hope the street lights are, correct?
What is that rate gonna do for a street maintenance fee?
It won't do, that's what I'm saying, it depends on, you can spend on whatever you want to spend it on, but
Yeah,
just the money generated from the street maintenance side of it, at $150 at the breakdown we have. Yeah, I don't think it covers the street lights. I think we're $6,000 or $7,000 short of our current budget. On the money that would be generated just from the street portion of that fee to cover street lights. And so,
So it's not even gonna touch the street department, what it takes.
not really, you know, those costs will have to be made up with general tax dollars, right? Because we're paying street lights right now as they stand, but
You save some from our fire fees.
yeah.
Fire portion of it, that would make it a little street.
That's one thing I'm gonna say is both versions put the budget, I think, is in a better position. The fire fee version, I think, puts the fire department in a much better position, but both versions put the whole budget in that better position.
Could we add something about a progressive increase? in
Boy, I was thinking the
years
same
in
thing.
there? So where it covers the cost of inflation, where you don't have to come in and redo an ordinance, is that possible?
I think maybe you want it as
Like,
possible.
what, so much percent,
Yeah, one thing
like
that
every 3 years, or?
so Nate and I have talked about this a little bit. One thing that I think you might consider, the Social Security Administration every year puts out a cost of living adjustment. You might have a provision in there that, I almost don't want to say you don't want to do it automatic, but maybe direct your finance manager to bring you that number every year so that those numbers can be adjusted. So, all right, cost of living adjustment this year was 3.7%. Everything's got to change by 3.7%.
More or less what I'm saying, I don't want it to be 15 years.
Right. No,
And we haven't raised them, and that's what's got us into this fund right now.
Yep.
Okay, of course, nobody ever wants to do rates, but
No,
you know,
but
we kind
that's
of
where
choice
we-
if it's not covering cost
That's where we
of
found
the
ourselves.
services, you have to,
Yeah.
you have to do something. And I think when I figured it out, it came out to $3 and something per year, the increase. It's in 15 years, I think it came out to.
So if we ramped it up over
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
About right.
Because I think we're,
55 or 15.
I was gonna say, over the time, we've had like, what, a 46%, I think has been the inflationary number. Yeah, you'd broken that up over years, see a lot easier to spell.
Yeah.
Question, do you want to use, I guess my question is, do you want to set a solid rate? That you're on a solid trajectory, or do you want to tie it to the inflationary number?
You're the finance guy.
Yeah.
Well, so for finance reasons, I say tie to the inflationary number, but I think there's a political balance there. Because a couple years ago, what inflation was 15% and everybody was feeling it. Now, thing is, when inflation's 15%, that means Social Security checks are going up 15%. A lot of things are, there's other things going up 15%, so fees might have to go up 15% too, but. If you do tie it to inflation, just know that in those really economically troublesome times. Your fee is gonna go up by a lot more, and that's,
I don't think that's feasible.
yeah, it could be, yeah, exactly, I think I think the inflation number makes sense, but it's a political question. And do you think economic bad times are ahead of us or not? You know, do you think they're behind us?
That's what happens in 2020.
Yeah.
There's the element, I think, too, where. There's not any kind, you're not passing a constitutional amendment here, right? Any council,
We can change it.
any council can change it, right? And I think that. There's the element that I don't necessarily think you can make one council beholden to,
Yeah.
what you said from a budgetary standpoint. So I think there's a lot of give and take there that would still happen. So I think almost at that point. What I think you would be a good thing to have in the law is that whoever's running the city administration down the line is required to bring you some kind of study of inflation and the impact on the budget that the municipal fee has annually to be considered for council. So when you set that budget, that's when you should consider those rates. In my
To
opinion.
be possibly in to be reviewed every 3 years.
Or-
So it is brought to the agenda because,
I think
we
annually,
just, I mean, I'm sure it's been just, nobody's ever thought about it, until
I think when you do your annual budget,
annually,
Yeah,
annually. or
Because you're doing the
something.
budget
Yeah.
annually anyways, that's a great idea. So I think it means reviewing annually.
Well, and that's it's effectively, so when we go in and do our first budget, that's what we're doing, is we're reviewing the tax rate. We're reviewing
Right.
the ad valorem tax
So
rate.
you're already doing work.
Right. But we could do the same thing with fees. I think fees need to be reviewed yearly, and we'll set the fee based on what the budgetary needs are.
Well, it sounds like everyone's sort of leaning towards, the first proposal. Stephen, do you have any thoughts or comments? I don't mean to put you on the spot,
No.
but I am.
So right now, we're functioning off of something more similar to the first, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, realistically, we're able to function decently with what we know. But I think, we've had issues with, well, if we keep hiring more police officers, we're gonna have to find more money somewhere. And we're always short of police officers. It's the same thing with fire. And I think we're kicking ourselves in some ways, because we got problems across the board that need addressed. What problems are big, and what do people say constantly about Weston? Right now, it's drugs, we got transits, things of that nature. And that's a difficult thing, but fire response to literally everything as well. So I think for me, it's how can we cover effectively fire as best as possible, as well as the police department. And with the fire only, I mean, as long as we can cover the police department, I don't see why we couldn't do just the fire only here. I think that's my biggest concern, is just covering both. And really, I mean, making the police department as effective as possible. I mean, that's a lot of people, at least in my ward, maybe it's just my ward, that they want to see more police officers out. They want to see, them on the streets and that kind of thing. So, that's where I'm at. So if we can make the budget work, PD and fire, I really enjoy that. Because it sounds like the street department, that money's not gonna get there to be much use anyways.
and I do probably a terrible job of selling this, Steve, so I apologize, but. Again, like this money just kind of goes into a big pot, or essentially goes into the general fund. And we stir that thing up and we have a budget for it. We dole it out as council describes. But I think what we're trying to do is raise that level of general fund and use, with the proceeds from fire have to be dedicated to the fire services, and so. And we could probably, the numbers are the numbers in the sense that you guys can set whatever rate you want to set in a sense. But we were trying to not forget about the other services in a sense, be able to try to say there's some real costs that we want to be able to point to. And I think it goes back to that discussion, like annually, what are our rates going to be? We know we've got to come up really quick this year, and so you don't really get to kind of, in my mind, this is like a catch-up year for our rates. We're saying, we gotta get them up to this higher level, and we're just gonna bring in the money we bring in.
Sure.
But then the next year, if we put a provision there, we said we're gonna consider these annually, maybe on the street fees side portion, you're saying, well, our street light bill went up another 5% this year, because that's what First Energy took. We need 65,000. What do we have to get from our street light portion to cover that cost? And I think that that's a win. And the way that we've got 3 services listed here, but there's no reason we couldn't pick other services that have a fee system as well. And I'm not suggesting it at this point, but the code speaks to Parks and Rec, it speaks to street paving, speaks to street lighting specifically. That's one reason we have that idea in there, police protection. There's all kinds of different services, garbage in there, things of that nature. And so I think as you move forward, you're gonna be operating on a fee for service
Right.
condition unless the tax scheme changes in West Virginia.
Sure.
And so this kind of sets you up to start looking at those things long term and say, you know, if people want an animal control service or whatever that service
Right.
is, you gotta figure out what that cost is, and you gotta send that fee down the pipe to them. You know, you're willing to pay $12 a month to make sure the fee line drops the rate. Those are the kinds of value judgments we want people to start considering and make it easier for council to decide as well.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Can we not just round up the fire and street or the police and street to $25 and make it 155? To me, it'd just be a little easier
I don't
to,
think there's anything stopping you.
Yeah, no,
an extra 250 on each side.
Yeah.
it's not gonna kick us over that street light.
I know.
Right.
Hold on. Under the fire, police and streets version, you want the,
Police protection and the street maintenance to go from $22.50 to just a flat $25. And it makes it, and are we going to offer quarterly installments or anything where they don't have to come?
That's a really good question.
Monthly installments.
Yeah, I wanna spend a little bit of time speaking to this, and I actually invited Dee here tonight, just in case we spoke to this. And she knew, that we might. So one of the things that we've been talking about and I've been thinking about, is monthly billing. I think monthly billing makes all these things a lot more palatable. The other thing is, other communities that have their fire fee on, monthly billing schedule, the way that they're doing that is they're billing it on their utility bills. And what's happened is their collection rate on their fire fee is being brought way up by their collection rate on utilities. So quick background, collection rate on utilities in this area, among other utilities, is around 99%. Whereas when you're billing just fees, just on regular fee, that's where your collection rate can be anywhere from 60 to 90%. Our municipal fee collections have been in that 88 to 93% range historically, which is really good for the way that we bill that. Sewers collection, what was it, is it around 97%? 97%, which, and this, I'm gonna throw her on the bus for a minute, it's actually low for a sewer utility in the area. But it's high compared,
Yeah.
yeah, but it's high compared to what we're doing billing fees. And so there's this kind of struggle of, well, she's working on getting that better, and we're working together on that, and I think that's going well, and it's gone up, it's already gone up just in the last 6 months, that collection rate has gone up. So that's getting better, but then so I think, well, if we build these fees on sewer bills, where and when applicable, would that raise our collection rate there? Would we do better? And would it be more palatable for people? My hesitation, and the reason why that's not either of these versions this year, is because the sewer board is not in a super financially solid place right now. And there's already a need at the sewer board because they're collecting things like stormwater and excise tax and all these things, that there are monthly transfers that need to be happening that haven't always been happening regularly in the past couple of years because of that cash. I don't want to put the city's general fund in a position where we're waiting on a transfer from the sewer board, and the sewer board says, I owe you 14,000, but there's only 6,000 in the bank, so you know, yeah. So, but I think that it's
No, we've remedied that.
well, right. So it's gotten better, and I think as we continue to talk about ways that the city and the sewer are going to work closer together, and what we have in plan for the next year, I think that maybe next year it's plausible to do that. And I think that would be a really good thing. But I don't think it's plausible this year And a couple of considerations are, one, there's a really big expense with monthly billing if you're not already doing it. Sewer board's already doing it, so there's no added expense to add it on those bills. But we spend like $3,000 a year in postage, just getting municipal fees out, and we would make that 3,000 a month if we turn that to monthly
Right.
right now. So that would be a huge expense. But there's other things you can do, like, we could send out a bill that had, stubs on it. The same way if you have your mortgage through Citizens Bank, you know that they give you that little book and you just show up with your payment stub when you're supposed to. We could send out something with quarterly stubs so that people pay it for. Something that we've always done is offered the opportunity for, payment plans. And as long as folks have stayed in regular communication with the city, we've got one guy who pays $5 a month. And he makes it to Judy, doesn't he? He walks here and he makes it in.
And if it's snowing, he'll say, Judy, I can't make it.
He'll call in and say, I can't make it. And so we've never charged him a late fee, because he,
Fundraising for him.
he tries his best, and that's kind of been our acting norm, is if people are in communication with us and they're making payments and they're trying, then we're not charging them late fees, we're not charging them. They just gotta be trying and gotta be in communication.
So as far as our first due hearing. Is everyone in first due hearing about?
No.
I think
No, so if we were-
We're not getting everyone.
Right.
anyway.
So if we were to try to move towards monthly billing in the future, basically everybody in the city could get monthly.
I think the cost would be astronomical.
I'm talking about doing it on the server bill. I don't think it's an option to do that monthly billing.
No,
I think that the way that we would, because, and we talked about a way to work this into one of these ordinances. Is basically the people who get the privilege of monthly billing are the people who would be on sewer. Everybody else would be annual billing. Monthly billing would be a privilege for people who had sewer.
Right.
And we can do it, even if they don't have sewer.
We can do it even if they don't have sewer, but that's where then, so we're adding a whole bunch more bills that he has. to
well,
fill out
every time
first.
we add more jobs, we add cost.
Right.
And the purpose of this is to increase revenue.
Right.
To cover our costs, and so, as you know.
Well, and that's why I think the most plausible way to get from here to there is I think to say. We're gonna bill monthly. People who are on sewer, and we're still gonna retain billing annually people who aren't on sewer. I think the
But
big
not
dis,
this year.
but not this year, yeah,
I'm fine with that.
and I think the big disadvantage of that, just to be. Transparent is then we're billing in two totally different systems, got some people over here and some people over here, but I think that's manageable. And I think it's the right place to head. I don't think that we're ready for that right now.
Especially once we're over.
Yeah, I think that's really, I think when sewer's over here and they're in a better position financially, and hopefully their rates change and. They're not struggling to make payroll and, I think. All those balance lined up. And then I think it makes sense to bill monthly when and where we can, but we're still gonna have to bill annually where there is no sewer. But I think we will continue to have the same practice of a willingness to set up payments.
Sure.
So in the first due fire area, how many units will that encompass for us?
So,
No,
Yeah, this is, so
Yeah.
how many more is that?
Yeah, I'm gonna say, that sounds positive. I just saw it in my head real quick. At least 3,000 units, do you think that's right, Nate?
I'd say approximately, yeah,
Um,
residential. And then you probably have another 270 commercial potentially.
and currently, I think we have about 2,000 in city, right? So we're looking at
Yeah, approximately.
a little more than doubling the load. And this is where I'm gonna shamelessly remind you that there's still a municipal fee for in the budget. And you might need them. That's right, so if you had a person who was working, like you can. And there's a few of these going on there. One, you're allowed to budget in fire department, so if we wanted to have someone who works for the fire department, whose job was fee collections, they can do that. But then also, state auditor's office recognizes that there are expenses that there's expenses to collecting these types of fees. That maybe aren't captured in that department's budget. So anytime that you're collecting for a fee for a department, their expectation is that 85% of that revenue gets spent in that department. And then up to 15% can be spent administratively. So, I mean, if you took 15% off that streetlight thing, we're not even close there. The streetlight now, but we do have the freedom.
I will say that I have had some people say, this better not good, I hear somebody else with that. City building. You better go straight for, services.
It's a service industry.
I know. I'm just saying, yes, sir. I'm gonna let them.
I'm proud of these people, that we don't have a whole lot of chaff here, and I would say that. Hand on the Bible, cross my heart, and everything else, today was a crazy day, and frankly, folks in this building did not stop from the moment they walked into the moment they walked out, and so. Yes, I understand that pressure from people, and I understand that desire, but I tell you what, it's hard running the city with the staffing level we do. And I think just in the last couple of weeks, I've looked around everybody and said, I wish we had more people, and that's been a first for me, but we're doing so much with what we have. So, and that's because we have good people, but
People don't realize. that.
yeah, it's a lot, it's a lot.
Okay, I have a
and-
question on, I'm sorry.
No,
I'll go, so
the funds that are raised here, they're not allowed to be put over into the beautification budget or whatever. They have to be used for fire. They have to be used for police, they have to be used for streets.
Yeah, do you Sherry's?
Everybody else has, I might say. And so it's not like this money's gonna come in and we're gonna hire a whatever that has nothing to do with fire, police or.
Right.
Or streets.
Okay, so on page 5. Let's, can we? Yeah,
Fire, police and street version.
yes, yes. The vacant lot. So. Just for clarification, parking lots too. It's 5, page 5.
I
Do you
think-
have the same page?
Shall not be considered, wait, it says shall not be considered vacant lot.
Oh, okay.
And that's one I think we should talk a little bit about here, because I think our intention is. What we have in the cities, we'll have some people who own vacant lots who have no other activity
I
around that.
understand that.
And I think those people are a user group that needs to be captured. Then you'll have like. Somebody who has a building, right, and then they have a parking lot next to it. And we don't, I think for our intention is not to have that person have a parking lot attached to their parcel to be charged doubly for that parcel.
I agree. That's, I
Yeah.
misread that. I'm sorry.
No,
Thank you
no,
for that
and I think that's what we're trying to make clear, and if
Because
that's not
we're
clear,
already
we,
paid for that.
right,
Yes.
and we're not trying to just get people.
Right,
But we do
right.
have these lots, and we know some of them downtown, right, where there's a singular lot down there that someone owns. Who maybe doesn't even live in our municipality, and essentially right now they pay minimal property taxes. For their services, right, they're contributing minimally to that, and they pay 0 municipal fees, even though the police may show up. And they have to have a street to get to that lot and all those
Well,
things.
there are a
And
few
so-
of them, the police are there all the time.
Sure, exactly. And so we want those costs to at least be accounted for and captured in some form of fashion. And that's not only just downtown, that's residentially.
Well, I'm push back a little bit. on
Sure.
this, because then my neighbor has, here's their home, here's the street, and here's another lot that belongs there. So the street separates it. So they're right there on
It's
the
all
other
their yard
side.
though, right?
Well, there's 2 separate parcels, but
Okay.
the house is one parcel and the lot's another parcel.
Mhm.
And then we have a couple of those
Yeah.
in my area, because one,
Well, we had a council person on this last term who owns a parcel like this too, where we encountered the zoning issue, and he had a home here and a home catty corner. And so they weren't necessarily adjacent, but they were catty corner to one another. And our zoning law spoke to that and said that you know, we had, what parcel that was catty corner wanted to be developed, I think, for a garage. The zoning law would not allow a garage without a dwelling unit inside it to be developed. And so, yes, there's these weird things like that that I think we've got to work through and try to figure out, you know, do we want to consider those vacant lots? Or do we want to consider that all together?
I think we considered all together. There's an incident, the house that I owned on Cottage had different parcels. It had different tax tickets.
And I think,
And but yet it was all one.
and I think as long as you
Oh,
have a
piece of
residential
property.
structure and you have these, we probably need to define this a little bit, but
Yeah.
I think the intention is that you have a residential structure and you have 5 lots with that same house all interconnected. That's one, for all intents and purposes, that's one municipal fee.
Do we put that in with the vacant lot, like in order for us to be able to have a reading on this? Do we, and remember, we talked about working together and making the changes, so make a note.
I mean, I think it's,
Do we put it
I
under
mean,
vacant
just
lot?
spitballing some language. A vacant lot shall not be defined, or a vacant lot shall not be defined as parcels without buildings that are owned by owner of a, see, I can't get it right, because if you own this building, you're the owner, but you own 6 parcels, but these other 3 don't touch this building. All these 6 don't get a fee,
Right, so
but all these 6 are owned by the same person who owns this building. But once you start getting different ownership out here, I think you get into being a vacant lot. Is that what, I mean, I think, is that what we're trying
yes,
to get at?
that's what we're trying to get at, yes, because a lot of these properties in the city are like that, where, you know, something has happened, a house has been there, but now it's not, so they purchased it and it's now yard.
Yeah.
And
And
I think that's why
all of us
there are
would assume
different
that's a side yard at this point, right? It's a
that's
side
why
yard.
there are
Yeah.
different tax tickets at that
Right.
property over on Cottage, and you're so,
Sure.
so.
And I don't think our intention, that's why we didn't define it as, you know, per tax ticket, you're paying a fee.
Right.
That's no tax the fee, but,
Right,
you know, we are trying to capture that user who is using city services that has a lot that's not being accounted for that. user
Yeah.
fee.
Where did you get the 33.75? Which is.
That was, I think, police, well, there's 2 different categories, right?
25.
What page you're looking at there?
Because. Because somebody might have a lot, of just like. Very minimal piece of property, and they gotta pay almost $40 for that.
Because they're not.
Brian? I'm sorry, where did we get, where we said vacant lot and all other zones, you have 3375, where'd you pick that number from?
You go to. Page 6. And non-owner occupied residential unit.
Yep.
They're paying police and street fee at 33.75.
That should,
And so, just as a. I guess I use the zoning as a placeholder for how you define what your vacant lot is, because you don't have a building on it, so you can't be a structure.
right,
And so I just picked those zones. Not all zones are gonna be residential with a vacant lot on it. So it's picking, do you want everybody to pay a 25 fee, or do you want everybody to pay 33.75 fee, or do you want everybody to pay 62 fee?
so on the non-owner occupied, they're going, what are they currently paying? I don't remember. Joe, what are they currently paying?
150.
150. So their fees are going to increase a little more than $50.
You're gonna get. Charged 155 and you're about that 33.75.
Yes.
So.
So if you don't have a lot, if you don't have a building on your lot, if you don't have a building on a lot, you're gonna get charged 33.75 plus 33.75. vacant lots don't have building,
Cause you're.
and so neighbors will pay fire fee that a residential unit.
Yeah, so you're not paying the fire.
You're not paying the fire fee. That,
I
I'm
understand.
misunderstanding.
I understand.
It is confusing, I read it through.
I understand. I understand now, yeah. I think we just need to talk about it. And, you know, although I was studying the wrong ordinance.
Well,
That's what it is.
Let's say you have a residential lot though, and this is vacant lot, you're paying $66, right? For a vacant residential lot, because you're paying $33.75 for police and streets.
Right. Well, they get the.
Okay, so let me just hypothetically, all right, say. My house is here. And then down the street, I may own another lot that's not connected to my house, so you're telling me I have to pay $60-some on that? Even though I maintain it, keep it mowed, everything else, I'm gonna have to pay an extra
That's
$60-some.
what I suppose at this point.
It's a little steep.
Yeah, and it may be, it's completely up to your guys' judgment.
They're still
discretion.
getting services though.
Right, and that's universal fee.
You can have campers on that property, but not that property, and you're gonna need the. Police,
I'm just saying I'm just saying that could be an argument
Yeah.
It
out
could
there.
be, it could be.
yeah,
People, and we're gonna have some explanation for it as to why we're charging the $60-some for a lot.
Can I step on my soapbox again for a second? And it's not nothing against you. I drive down the road a lot of times and you'll see this big hillside, and like, man, I'd love to hunt on that piece of property. And then you get on the assessor's website and you say, that's owned by,
Yeah.
TGL out of New York City, New York. And you say, when was the last time TGL, whoever it was, came down here and did anything? And then you look at their tax assessment and there'll be nothing, right? I mean, it'll be $100, $200, and that's what they've paid to have road frontage all that time. And so I think part of my motivation or thought process with this is that I kind of want to discourage people from sitting on things, right? There is a cost to having property in Weston. And that we do expect people who do have property, and I don't want to be mean to anybody, but who sit on it, who just buy it and have this low cost because property taxes are so low. We want there to be an extra cost there to motivate them to do something useful with it. Because we're limited by our boundaries. We don't have a whole lot of area to waste. And so that's really what I'm kind of driving at. And I know that probably catches people up in it who are maybe doing good things with the property. But I do want to see that those real costs realized. Because right now in our current scheme, they're just getting away with very low inputs.
So,
But there are fees associated. That we have for the city, they still get the street plowed in front of that vacant lot. We still have to pay the street light bill at that lot. And we still have to respond as a police department to that lot.
But it's a real cost.
But I see what you're.
but what I'm
saying as
saying
well.
is, I think that especially, people on fixed income, well, you're going to raise here, and then all of a sudden, well, they may have this law, and now they gotta pay $60-some.
How would you, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but is there a workaround to that, you
I
think?
don't know, this is the first time I
Yeah,
really
yeah.
analyzed it sitting here tonight, so I didn't come with a solution for that.
Sure. Yeah, that's fair.
But, I think also you're. Because somebody owns something they're not living here, you're kind of, people who are living here are getting the brunt of that cost too. Anyway.
I'm thinking about the homestead exemption. Is there a way to parlay the homestead exemption into something where you have a scheme where you exempt folks who are homesteaded in the city, where you give them a lower reduced rate but I think you're gonna, some of these parcels, and I don't want to use the word targeting, but I am kind of thinking about them when I'm writing it or proposing this. Like, some of those people live in the city. So some of these critical ones that I think that we want to say, we need you to do something with this. We need it to be a real cost consideration here. They'll probably get out from under it with something like that. So I'm all ears, Debbie, if you can figure out a way of
I'm
doing
just
it.
thinking because I think some people will probably inherit things too.
And Marty, you're still here, right? I mean, that's one of our biggest problems with dilapidated structures, is people inherit stuff and then don't take care of it, right? Or move away or whatnot. And so that's,
Or charge a little bit of something, maybe they'll do something with it or sell it to somebody that will do something.
yeah.
And I like the idea. Charging, I mean, it's as much as if someone did have a house on there just without fire. I think it's a good idea.
I just think 16.
per year.
And we just picked that number because we were trying to align our
I mean, I can
costs.
see the 3371,
Yeah.
want that, but I can't see. 16, that's just- Okay, so do you want Brian to do?
Right there, this, 62 we were just talking about. Is that on the vacant lots? And you keeping it that?
For the, I'm the commercial, but I was thinking I was just alluding to the residential model. Having to pay the 67.
But the residential, they're paying. Well, I guess they pay, yeah, you pay 33.75 now, too.
So then on page 7, we're talking about commercial fees, right?
In what section?
Which is not, they're up to
Great.
I'm gonna say, I'm gonna be mean, let's use non-residential unit. Because there's also industrial, you know, I mean, if we technically only get commercial. That kind of limits you on
What word do you want me to use?
non-residential. Unit.
Okay,
The non-residential unit is defined as anything that's used for non-residential purposes.
okay. Okay, are we contradicting ourselves in the problem 4? On page 7?
Okay.
No. This is non-residential zones, non-residential areas on number 4, 0, once again, fire protection fee. But we're speaking about vacant lots again.
I think what we're trying, I mean, answer your question, maybe I don't just.
It's
understand.
commercial, it's, I think I'm talking myself through it to
Yeah.
try to grasp it, general, commercial, mixed use or neighborhood.
Well, what we run into, like, let's say in a commercial district right now,
I understand.
you have a mixed use property where you have a commercial space on the bottom and you have residential on top. We break those fees up differently between all the residential units and the commercial space. You have an empty lot in a commercial area. We've leaned on the zoning code to say
Right.
that's a lot in a zone, commercial area, that's the fee it's gonna pay.
Right, I
Does that
understand.
make sense? Okay.
And it clearly states vacant lot in all other zones,
Yeah.
3375. Mhm. Where does our first do fire? Do you know the approximate area? How much is it?
224 square miles. It's a lot. Takes us about 26 minutes to get to the farthest end of our first day.
Is a resort in our first due? Okay, so I've got them in right now. I need to take them.
Just stops at the Christmas place, Janie's place there.
Okay.
Okay. Is Walker still firefighting functional? Yeah. There's a
They have been.
up and running.
Go all the way to Georgia, Goose Bend Road, all the way to Three Lake. All the way to Copeland, Gilbert County line.
All the way to,
Wow.
and for it to go.
I
down
didn't
the
realize that.
From the 83-mile marker to the 101 is our first day.
Yeah, but I sit there on the.
Yep.
Nice.
It's a long way, just about 28-minute response time most times to that area.
And it wasn't an empty house and no utilities. And those
If
are
you
the
wait,
calls.
so if we're waiting 5 to 7 minutes for guys to get there and respond, and then 28-minute drive, it's already 36, 34, 35 minutes into it. So
Well, I don't want to pressure any of you onto this tonight. I think we need to have a discussion about it. Like I said, if we made it on there, if there was action. Councilman Curtis, last time we sat down like this, he said, what are you waiting on? So I wanted to
I know.
be able to give him the opportunity to move forward if he so choose. But like I said, some things tonight you're seeing for the first time, things we worked through. We've been talking about for a long time, we're willing to get those to paper, so if it's something you want to digest a little bit longer.
Get it in the paper, we have to advertise this.
When you pass it, when it gets passed. You have to put class 2 advertisements in the paper, that's running 2 weeks. And then from the date that second one runs. 30% of the municipality, if it gets together and
I understand.
objects, for lack of better, or petitions, then. The city has to put it to a citywide vote. And if it passes there, then it passes as an ordinance. Now, if nobody in that 45 days, if 30% or more of the people inside the municipality. Don't file a petition or not enough sign a petition, then it becomes an ordinance.
Is it possible that Brian can make some of the corrections that we talked about tonight? And then shoot that out in an email to us for review before the next regular meeting? So that we can consider having a first reading.
I have a question, okay, in order to enact this in July 1. Do we have enough time to do that?
What do you think, Joe?
So,
That went around the room.
if I know what's coming, I think so. So, I mean, in terms of getting, you can get this enacted in a month. You know, if you do your first reading, you run your publication for 2 weeks, you do a second reading. So the problem then becomes me doing the work. Because normally, for context, Susie started municipal fees in February or March, and she picked away at a little bit. So I'm hoping to get started very soon. And I'm gonna have to pick away at it lot by lot to get that first due area, which is not currently in our billing system, right, in the billing system.
I think you gotta sit here and you gotta budget 45 days of waiting for a petition to come through. the door. So that leaves you all of June, so that's 30 days. Half of May, that's 45 days. All of May is 60 days. So if you have something by May 1st. You're gonna have that 45 days.
You gotta legitimately know how you can get the billing out.
Right, well, you can cover your ears if you need to, but it's a lot easier for me to delete an invoice than it is for me to wait until June to try to,
Start doing it.
try to start doing it.
Well, then if we even
But
do
to
it
me,
by,
even
if we even do it
maybe-
by,
I
Do
need
we
to at least
have-
know the numbers that were.
Do we have it, Joe, do we have in this ordinance a date where we're gonna institute first due? Did we end up, we worked on it,
I think in municipal fee scheme one, we're talking about everything's July 1st.
everything's July 1st.
Yeah.
let me make sure, I thought I did it.
That was one thing we chatted about. was
In
maybe
city users, July
schedule payment.
1st, 2024. Fees for first due area users, January 1st, 2025.
Oh,
And I think we were gonna prorate that for the year. So it'd be half the fee. And the reason, there's a couple reasons to that. One was just the workload of being able to get the first due enacted in that amount of time. And we thought 6 months seemed reasonable to be able to do that, but, and that's completely up to your all discretion. It's whatever you guys wanna do.
that's
But
up
that-
to Joe.
Well,
Joe's lazy, he'll
I mean, I'll do whatever you tell me to, don't be surprised.
I
if you
think
see
we
a
ought to
copy.
do it at the same
Same
time.
time, and that's fine.
Do it at the same time.
I think.
And I'm gonna take up for Joe. I think if we do that, he's gonna need some help. You know, we've got that position in the budget that when the municipal fee clerk, we'll probably try to hire that in some capacity.
There we go.
So we want to- Yep.
Do we want July 1? All fees are due July 1 of 24, or do we want to
Well, they'll
Yes.
they'll be invoiced July.
invoice? If we
Yeah.
bump that to January 125, is that,
Messes up cash flow for the city if you bump the whole thing.
it's not enough?
Well, don't bump the whole thing, is
Okay.
what I'm saying. Yeah, that's,
Which way is best, Joe? Seriously,
yeah,
you do that job, you know,
yeah.
we're asking your opinion.
Well, I've never added 3,000 into the system.
So. Is this gonna, do you like the way that it states now?
The July 1st year, I think that's, because, so two things are happening here. One is everybody who's already in the city is gonna be billed a different amount next year than they were last year. So that's its own lift. And then we're also more than doubling the amount of users that we're billing, so that's a separate. So I do prefer in city users billed July first. And that's already gonna see more income on July first than we used to
Sure.
see, because we're increasing all those rates effectively by 50%. And then the others billed the first time on January first. My dream, the vision, is that by next July first, we're doing as much monthly as we can. So I think that's the promise I have, but I don't know, I do prefer the July 1 for in the city, January 1 for out of the city. And if we end up having to, and here's the other thing too, is that it's not just me, it's also Judy and Julie. Because in July, Judy and Julie are tied to their desks receiving payments. Because we're receiving payments from. We're receiving payments from a large swath of those 2,000 people that we bill all at once. So people line up out the door to pay those payments, and so we're increasing that number, so it increases their load too. So if you increase all of that on July 1st, it's not just my work that goes up all at once. But if you break it up and say first due fire happens in January, January comparatively is a slower month here than July is. And so you're saying, okay, we're gonna get heavy in July, then we get to take a breath, and then we're gonna get heavy again in January.
We
But
figure
it is more reasonable, I
the
think.
first time those bills come out, we're gonna get phone calls and a lot of
Sure.
them. Yeah, and that's gonna be
Have
all
all
hands
your
on
own
deck.
phone numbers.
Yeah. That's another concern
They're
too.
just gonna.
I'll entertain a motion to table the first reading of that ordinance, please.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved in second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Well, at least we made progress, a lot of progress.
We appreciate it.
Yeah.
Ryan said, like when it's advertised in the paper, there's a 45-day window for residents of the city to file a petition, protest, whatever you want to call it. Do people that are affected by first due out of the city get that?
Not according to state law, and it's been challenged under this concept that, yeah, we're being charged a fee without representation. That's also been upheld by the West Virginia Supreme Court and the United States Supreme Court. That you're getting a fee, you're not being taxed on any particular value of your property. It's like going to McDonald's and paying for a hamburger. You're getting a service, and so you have to pay for that
I'm
service.
sure that question is in the.
Oh, it's definitely.
Hang on, see that case tomorrow?
Okay, next, under new business, the regional opioid board through West Virginia First Foundation, which covers 13 counties. The county and city officials met, and they each are going to have their own representative on that board. So the Lewis County Commission will be presenting someone for nomination to the board. And last week I called Mayor Straley, and she wanted me to do that. I was hoping that we'd pick somebody from the public, but what she said made sense, and I agreed to accept her nomination as part of the municipal recommendation, only because funding, I think, is of a premium, and submitting a proposal. And we want to make sure that with whatever funding there is available, that the city of Weston is well represented at the table. So for that reason, I agreed. And if you all would like to consider that, then I'll entertain a motion to support my appointment.
I said, maybe.
Go ahead. Okay. It's been moved and second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. City manager update.
I don't even remember why I put sanitary board update on here, D, so. We've had a fun-filled week down there, I think. I think I did want to mention to you, since we were kind of talking rates tonight, that we know that the sanitary service is another service that hasn't seen a rate consideration for a couple years now. And that last rate increase was the going level increase to get us leveled up, and then now we had massive inflation, so we're probably behind the eight ball again. We met with the accountant in the last week. We've got the ball rolling on that rate study. We're probably looking at a couple rate increases in a sense from the initial discussion. And that's one's due to the project for the sludge thing. You have to make sure as part of the project funding that you have the proper rates engaged for that. And then you have, the business side of the rate study. So I know.
That's not worse than.
Should have done at the last one. We should have done.
A progression.
Yeah.
And, that's where it like just.
But I think that was a project related increase, right? That last one?
That
Dropped,
hell on
we
back.
needed.
Yeah.
They put out 2 truck, everything broke down,
So-
I just know that.
We did have that discussion about our service levels and frankly, I'm gonna say the cost of service outside the municipal boundary. And so, we have 50-some pump
We got
stations,
good, Judy.
50-some pump stations, 40 of those roughly that are located outside the city. And, the density of the sewer service outside the city is a lot less than it is inside the city. And what I mean by that is we've got areas where you run 400 feet of sewer mains to 3 homes. In the city, those areas are fewer and far in between. And so as part of that discussion was that I'm gonna say I laid the groundwork, Dee. I don't know how far I got with you, but I think we're gonna start down that path to try to give that stronger consideration in the rates and to be able to kind of back up and have a scientific method to say, hey, if we are gonna charge a premium outside of our boundaries, why is that happening and what should that cost be? Something we can point to. So that process is in its infancy. We started it, and I wanted to bring you guys up to speed on that, but.
You're going to be.
Well, and that requires some accounting changes too.
Sure.
And thankfully, Joe and Dee have been working together and will continue to identify those costs as far as inside and outside city, so that we'll have a better financial picture on what it's costing.
And I think it goes a long ways, like where we've got a couple of extension requests right now, like up Lynn Avenue and potentially on Smith's Run. Like when you start figuring those real costs in there, people realize this is not a free service. This isn't something somebody just runs on my house and I get to hook up to.
Right.
There's real costs involved with this stuff, and those costs have to be captured. We'll switch gears a minute and talk about the status of the phase 2 project. We had our sanitary board meeting for this. That project is doing everything within its power to be ready to go to bid and construction by the end of the year in order to capture some of those funds that we've got allocated. I think it's the economic enhancement grant. That's the requirements that project has to be constructed, begin construction this year. That's a very tight timeline. But I think we've been assured by Bob Bragg, Testa, that they can meet it and they're being aggressive about it. And I think we've got some good news. It sounded like last couple of weeks for some of those timelines he was thinking were going to be dragged out, aren't going to have to be dragged out as much. So he was very positive about it. So we're trying to, I think that's about $500,000 as part of the project from that grant that we're trying to get them to that threshold to make sure we can capture that. And so they've already started preliminary engineering out on the site where they've done some survey work and they're trying to get the geotech folks in there. So that's moving along. He did bring a request this evening. So as part of this project, when the funding package, if you guys remember, we were going to contribute $100,000 of our ARPA dollars towards that sludge portion. And part of I think the total project is around 3.8 or something like that. When that includes all the design work, all these other things. But Testa has been doing this project pro bono essentially with the theory that once the project gets accepted, then they'll start getting paid a little bit. And they've been carrying that now for almost 2 years with zero cost, and but there's people come up here and do the meetings and stuff. So Bob made the request today if his superiors were requesting to see if they could receive some payment from the project to be able to help them manage their books a little bit better or whatnot. And my thought was, and we're going to follow up with him, is that the preliminary engineering part, whether the project goes forward or not, that is a cost I anticipate we're going to have to pay no matter what. And so my thought was, I'm gonna look and see what that costs us with him and try to pay him for the preliminary engineering work, or at least bring you guys a request to pay him from the ARPA dollars. The work done on the preliminary engineering report. So
What is our budget?
We've allocated all of it, but that was. in
that was in an
allocation.
allocation. Yeah, it's not any kind of special thing.
And we have to have it spent this year.
We're allocated by the end of the year.
I think you have to have invoices. I think they just changed that.
Oh, really?
Just, you might wanna double check it.
Okay. we better
Because
get
they're
rid
gonna
of it.
wanna take it back, I can
Alright.
tell you that much
All
right
right.
now. Yeah,
So, anyhow, that's, I'm thinking we just contribute whatever our ARPA allocation, because that still goes in the pot, it still gets contributed to the project. And then at that point, we can't lose the money, we
Right.
spend it, all that good
Right.
stuff, so. He's gonna send us the preliminary engineering report as of the meeting, we're gonna read through that and make sure that what I'm telling you is the truth, and if it's not, I still think we should pay him. But I was just trying to use that as a
And that goes
justification.
towards that match of ours.
Yep, and that will be our match.
That will be our
Yeah,
match.
you're right,
Okay,
$100,000.
so make sure we don't have to have another
No,
Yeah.
that will be.
pot there.
Well, I think the only fear then is if, when they bid the project, the number may change, right, if the project comes in way over estimates, so. Then they're gonna have to try, we're gonna have to try to find with Bethesda additional funding somewhere. But this is gonna have to be spent no matter if it's 3.8 million or not, so that's the goal, so. We'll have that probably at the first of the regular meeting for your consideration as well. That's all I have, thanks, man.
thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Okay, motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thanks, everybody. I think I read somewhere where it has to be invoiced.